The morning light from the twin suns of Vega Prime cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Galactic Council chambers. Ambassador Zethkar shuffled his papers with barely concealed boredom as he prepared to deliver what he considered routine administrative news. The towering Vraxian had served in diplomatic roles for over 3 centuries and had seen countless species come and go from various agreements. Today's announcement would be no different. Captain Ryan Murphy stood at attention near the human delegation section, his weathered face showing decades of service among the stars. His gray hair was neatly trimmed in military fashion, and his blue uniform bore the simple insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps. At 63 years old, Murphy had witnessed humanity's first contact with alien civilizations, their gradual acceptance into galactic society, and now this moment that few understood the true significance of. Dr. Lisa Grant sat in the observer gallery, her tablet recording every detail of the proceedings. The 50-year-old xenobiologist had dedicated her entire career to studying the complex relationships between the galaxy's numerous species. Her brown eyes moved carefully from delegate to delegate, noting their body language and reactions. She knew what was coming, though the aliens in the chamber did not. Zethkar's voice echoed through the vast chamber as he began reading from his prepared statement. The human delegation has formally submitted notice of withdrawal from all interstellar agreements, effective immediately, he announced in his deep, resonant tone. The humans cite philosophical differences and a stated need for isolation to pursue what they term internal development. He paused briefly, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. This withdrawal affects trade agreements, research, partnerships, military cooperation pacts, and all diplomatic treaties currently in force. A soft murmur rippled through the chamber, but it was more curious than concerned. The Altarian delegate, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in brilliant patterns, actually produced what sounded like laughter. How charmingly typical of the humans, she said to her aide. Always so emotional and dramatic about everything. The Corvin representative, a heavily built humanoid with gray skin and pronounced facial ridges, nodded in agreement. They never truly understood the benefits of galactic cooperation anyway, he rumbled. Perhaps isolation will teach them what they're giving up. Murphy remained perfectly still as the comments continued around him. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had been members of galactic society for only 200 years, a brief moment compared to civilizations that had been spacefaring for millennia. Humans were often seen as the newcomers, the species that brought little to the table. Beyond curiosity and stubbornness. Dr. Grant watched as delegate after delegate dismissed the announcement with casual indifference. The Silurians, known for their advanced scientific capabilities, seemed more interested in their data tablets than the proceedings. The Xerians, fierce warriors who had fought alongside humans in several conflicts, showed no visible reaction at all. Even the Centauri, who had been humanity's closest trading partners, appeared unconcerned about losing human commerce. The formal vote to accept humanity's withdrawal was unanimous and swift. No delegate requested time to consider alternatives or negotiate terms. No one asked why humans had made this decision or whether anything could be done to change their minds. The galaxy's governing body processed humanity's departure with the same bureaucratic efficiency they would use to approve a routine trade regulation. Ambassador Zethkar stamped the documents with his official seal and declared the matter closed. The human withdrawal is hereby accepted and recorded, he announced. All existing agreements will be terminated within the standard grace period of 30 standard days. Murphy saluted the assembly once and turned to leave. As he walked toward the exit, he caught Dr. Grant's eye in the observer gallery. She gave him a barely perceptible nod. The first phase of humanity's plan was complete. Outside the chamber, the human delegation gathered in a small anteroom. Murphy was joined by Commerce Secretary Bill Hayes, a tall man with graying temples who had negotiated dozens of trade agreements over the past decade. Military Liaison Colonel Kate Ross stood beside them, her sharp green eyes reflecting the same quiet determination that characterized the entire human delegation. "How long do you think it will take them to notice?" Hayes asked quietly. Murphy considered the question carefully. 6 months for the immediate effects to show, he said. 2 years before they start connecting the problems to our absence. 5 years before they admit they made a mistake. Dr. Grant entered the room carrying her research materials. She had been humanity's leading expert on galactic psychology and had spent years studying how different species interacted. "The psychological profiles suggest it could be even longer," she said. "Most of these civilizations have never experienced true cooperation, only domination or submission. They don't understand interdependence." Colonel Ross pulled up a holographic display showing human positions throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked military bases, trade stations, research facilities, and diplomatic outposts. There were thousands of them, spread across hundreds of systems. "All stations report ready for evacuation," she said. "We can have every human off-world within 60 days. The evacuation began immediately. Human merchant vessels quietly completed their final trades and departed for Sol System. Research teams packed their equipment and data, leaving behind projects that had taken years to develop. Military advisors submitted their final reports and boarded transport ships. Diplomatic staff closed embassies and consulates that had served as bridges between countless civilizations. Captain Sarah Blake commanded the evacuation of Outpost Alpha 7, a human-run trading station that served as a hub for commerce between 6 different species. The station employed over 3,000 beings from a dozen worlds, with humans making up less than 10% of the workforce. As Blake supervised the departure of the human staff, she watched alien workers continue their duties with apparent unconcern. "They think we're just rotating personnel," Blake told her second-in-command, Lieutenant Dan Collins. "They have no idea this is permanent." Collins nodded grimly. "The Corvin shift supervisor asked me when the next human transport would arrive. He seemed annoyed that I couldn't give him a schedule." Dr. Peter Kim was wrapping up 15 years of joint research with Silurian scientists on quantum field theory. His alien colleagues had grown accustomed to his intuitive approach to problem-solving, though they had never fully understood how he reached his conclusions. As Kim packed his personal effects, the lead Silurian researcher reproached him. "This is quite sudden, Dr. Kim," the alien said, his large black eyes reflecting genuine confusion. "When will your replacement arrive?" Kim looked at his longtime colleague with something approaching sadness. "There won't be a replacement," he said quietly. "Humanity is ending all external research partnerships." The Silurian's expression showed disbelief. "But the Quantum Resonance Project is only months away from breakthrough. Surely your government would not abandon such important work." Kim finished packing his files and sealed the container. "I'm sorry," he said. "I truly am." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as humans quietly departed from positions they had held for decades. Mining supervisors left extraction operations running under alien management. Diplomatic mediators withdrew from ongoing negotiations between hostile species. Trade coordinators handed over their routes and contacts to alien successors. Military advisors transferred their duties to local commanders. The process was remarkably smooth and efficient. Humans had been planning this withdrawal for 5 years, ever since it became clear that their contributions were being taken for granted. They had prepared detailed transition documents, trained alien replacements where possible, and arranged for orderly transfers of responsibility. No one could accuse humanity of abandoning their duties carelessly. Within 90 days, the last Human civilian had departed alien space. The final military transports left their bases clean and empty, equipment properly stored and facilities maintained. Every human embassy had been closed, every trade agreement terminated, every research partnership concluded. 2 centuries of galactic cooperation ended not with arguments or conflicts, but with quiet professionalism. The galaxy barely noticed. Trade routes found alternative coordinators. Research projects continued with purely alien teams. Diplomatic negotiations proceeded without human mediators. Military operations adapted to alien-only command structures. Life went on as if humanity had never been there at all. Back on Earth, the returning humans began the next phase of their plan. The isolation would not be passive waiting, but active development of capabilities the galaxy had never imagined. Humanity would emerge from this period stronger, more advanced, and completely independent. When they next encountered alien civilizations, it would be on very different terms. 3 years had passed since humanity's quiet departure from galactic society, and the first signs of trouble began appearing in places no one expected. The problem started small, isolated incidents that seemed unrelated to anything as significant as an entire species withdrawing from civilization. Most alien administrators dismissed these early difficulties as temporary adjustments or simple coincidence. Commander Alex Bennett had supervised mining station Theta 7 for 12 years before humanity's withdrawal. The 45-year-old engineer had turned a struggling asteroid extraction operation into one of the most productive facilities in the Corvin Mining Consortium. His replacement, Senior Engineer Graith, possessed superior mathematical skills and decades more experience with mining technology. The Corvins were confident that their operation would become even more efficient under purely alien management. Instead, production began dropping within the first month. Graith studied the facility's operations with scientific precision, analyzing every system and procedure. The equipment functioned perfectly. The asteroid composition remained unchanged. The workflow processes matched established protocols exactly. Yet somehow, the station extracted 30% less ore than it had under Bennett's supervision. Worker productivity declined even more dramatically. The station employed miners from 6 different species, each with their own cultural backgrounds and work preferences. Under Bennett's management, these diverse crews had worked together smoothly, despite their differences. The human supervisor had somehow understood what motivated each species and knew how to resolve conflicts before they disrupted operations. Graith relied on standard management protocols that had worked well on purely Corvin facilities. He issued clear instructions, maintained rigid schedules, and enforced regulations uniformly across all species. When disputes arose between workers, he consulted procedural manuals and applied official conflict resolution guidelines. His approach was logical, fair, and completely ineffective. The Zarian miners, naturally aggressive beings who valued personal honor above efficiency, began fighting among themselves when their cultural traditions were ignored. The peaceful Altarian workers became withdrawn and unresponsive when treated with the same stern authority used for other species. The Centauri crews, who thrived on friendly competition and social interaction, lost motivation when their work environment became purely functional. Within 6 months, worker turnover reached critical levels. Beings who had happily worked at Theta 7 for years requested transfers to other facilities. Medical reports showed increased stress-related illnesses among the remaining staff. Equipment malfunctions increased as demoralized workers became careless with maintenance procedures. Graith submitted detailed reports to Corvin headquarters, documenting every problem and proposing solutions based on industrial psychology textbooks. His supervisors reviewed the data with growing concern, but found no obvious explanations for the facility's decline. The former human manager had left comprehensive documentation of all procedures. Yet somehow the station no longer functioned as effectively. Similar problems emerged throughout the galaxy, wherever humans had previously served in supervisory or coordination roles. The Centauri trade negotiations, once smoothly managed quarterly meetings, devolved into year-long disputes filled with accusations and threatened boycotts. Ambassador Helen Carter had mediated these sessions for 15 years, somehow keeping dozens of competing commercial interests aligned toward mutually beneficial agreements. Carter's replacement, Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Commercial Guild, brought centuries of diplomatic experience and advanced training in negotiation theory. His approach emphasized logical analysis of each party's stated positions and systematic evaluation of potential compromises. Every decision was carefully documented and justified according to established precedents. The negotiations immediately became more contentious. Species that had previously accepted Carter's guidance began questioning every ruling and demanding detailed explanations for decisions. The Vrexians accused the Altarians of favoritism when Veltar approved a shipping route that benefited crystalline-based life forms. The Corvins withdrew from 3 separate agreements when their proposals were rejected based on strict adherence to trade regulations. What Veltar failed to understand was that Carter had never relied solely on formal diplomatic procedures. The human ambassador had spent years learning about each species' cultural values, economic pressures, and political constraints. She knew that the Vrexians needed to feel respected as a powerful empire, even when making concessions. She understood that the Corvins valued practical results over theoretical fairness. She recognized that smaller species required extra assurance that their interests would be protected. Carter had managed these negotiations through a combination of formal diplomacy and emotional intelligence that no textbook could adequately describe. She read body language, listened for subtext in conversations, and sensed when delegates were becoming frustrated or defensive. Her compromises worked because they addressed not just the stated positions, but the underlying needs and concerns of each party. Dr. Kevin Ross had spent 8 years working with Silurian scientists on quantum field theory research. The joint project had made steady progress toward understanding fundamental questions about space-time manipulation and energy generation. Ross brought an intuitive approach to theoretical physics that complemented the Silurians' methodical mathematical analysis perfectly. His alien colleagues were initially optimistic about continuing the research without human participation. The Silurians possessed vastly superior computational abilities and had access to experimental equipment beyond anything available on Earth. They assumed that losing one human researcher, however talented, would barely slow their progress toward breakthrough discoveries. The project stalled completely within 18 months. Dr. Silvera, the lead Silurian researcher, found herself unable to make progress on problems that Ross had somehow always managed to solve. The human had possessed an unusual ability to recognize patterns in complex datasets and intuitive leaps that led to new theoretical frameworks. His approaches often violated conventional scientific methodology, yet they consistently produced results. Silvera tried to recreate Ross's problem-solving methods by studying his research notes and published papers. The documentation was thorough and well-organized, but it failed to capture the creative thinking process that had made Ross so valuable. His insights seemed to emerge from nowhere, connections between unrelated concepts that pure logic could not explain. The Silurian team expanded their computational resources and recruited additional researchers, hoping that superior numbers and technology would compensate for the loss of human intuition. They analyzed the quantum field equations with unprecedented precision and ran millions of theoretical models through their most advanced simulation systems. Every approach led to dead ends that Ross had somehow avoided. Other research projects throughout the galaxy experienced similar difficulties. Joint studies on planetary terraforming lost momentum when human environmental specialists departed. Archaeological expeditions struggled to interpret alien ruins without human cultural anthropologists. Medical research teams found themselves unable to develop treatments for multi-species diseases without human insights into biological adaptation. The pattern was subtle but consistent. Wherever humans had served as bridges between different ways of thinking, their absence created gaps that superior alien technology could not fill. Human researchers had contributed something beyond raw intelligence or technical skill. They brought perspectives that complemented alien capabilities in ways that were only becoming apparent through their absence. Captain Susan Torres had commanded deep space exploration missions for 2 decades, leading mixed crews of humans and aliens in searching for habitable worlds and useful resources. Her replacement, Captain Zixandra of the Crystalline Navigation Guild, possessed superior mathematical abilities and access to more advanced sensor technology. The crystalline officer was confident that her missions would discover significantly more valuable targets than Torres had ever found. Instead, Zixandra's expeditions consistently failed to locate the types of worlds that previous human-led missions had discovered regularly. Her ships conducted systematic surveys of star systems, identified by astronomical analysis as likely candidates for planet formation. The sensor sweeps were comprehensive, and the data analysis was flawless. Yet somehow her teams rarely found anything of interest. Torres had possessed an intuitive understanding of planetary formation that went beyond academic knowledge. She seemed to know where to look based on subtle environmental clues that could not be easily quantified or programmed into navigation computers. Her mission reports mentioned hunches and feelings about promising star systems, unscientific approaches that had nevertheless led to the discovery of 17 habitable worlds. Zixandra dismissed such unscientific methodology and relied on proven techniques of stellar analysis and systematic exploration. Her teams thoroughly investigated every system that mathematical models suggested should contain useful planets. 7 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy faced crises that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or temporary adjustments. The problems that had started as minor inefficiencies and isolated difficulties had grown into systemic failures that threatened the stability of interstellar civilization. What had once been the most peaceful and prosperous period in galactic history was rapidly deteriorating into chaos and conflict. The Zirian rebellion exploded into full-scale warfare that consumed 3 entire star systems and threatened to spread throughout the Outer Rim territories. For decades, this conflict had been contained through careful negotiation and cultural mediation, led by human peacekeepers who understood both sides of the ancient dispute. The Zirians were a proud warrior species who valued honor and territorial sovereignty above all else. Their opponents, the Kalari Federation, were logical traders who prioritized economic efficiency and resource optimization. General Patricia Hayes had commanded the Outer Rim peacekeeping force for 15 years before humanity's withdrawal. The 52-year-old military officer had prevented 17 potential wars through what she called aggressive diplomacy. Hayes possessed an unusual combination of tactical brilliance and emotional intelligence that allowed her to understand what each species truly wanted beneath their stated demands. Her replacement, General Vorthak of the Vraxian Imperial Navy, brought superior firepower and centuries of military experience to the peacekeeping mission. The massive alien commander had won dozens of battles through overwhelming force and strategic superiority. His approach to conflict resolution emphasized strength, clear ultimatums, and rapid decisive action to eliminate threats before they could spread. This strategy proved catastrophically ineffective against the Zarian situation. Vorthak viewed the rebellion as a simple military problem requiring tactical solutions. He deployed advanced warships to contested systems and issued demands for immediate surrender, backed by threats of orbital bombardment. His forces possessed overwhelming technological advantages and could have crushed any Zerion military resistance within days. The Zerians responded by escalating their attacks and recruiting allies from oppressed species throughout the region. What had been a localized territorial dispute became a galactic independence movement as dozens of worlds declared their withdrawal from various federations and alliances. Vortex threats unified formerly separate rebellions into a coordinated resistance. Networks spanning hundreds of systems. Hayes had understood that the Zerian conflict was never really about territory or resources. The warrior species felt dishonored by decades of being treated as primitive beings whose concerns could be dismissed by more advanced civilizations. They needed to feel respected as equals before they would accept any peaceful resolution. Hayes had given them that respect while quietly addressing their legitimate grievances about resource allocation and political representation. Vortex saw only rebels who needed to be crushed and territories that needed to be pacified. His military campaigns won every battle, but lost the war by creating martyrs and inspiring more species to join the rebellion. Within 2 years, the Outer Rim territories were engulfed in conflicts that made interstellar travel dangerous and disrupted trade routes throughout the galaxy. The economic consequences of losing human expertise became equally devastating. The Andromedan Mining Guild, one of the galaxy's largest resource extraction corporations, went bankrupt after a series of catastrophic investment decisions that Dr. James Parker would have easily predicted and prevented. The Guild's alien economists had relied on sophisticated mathematical models that failed to account for the cultural and emotional factors that drove market behavior. The crisis began when the Guild invested heavily in rare metal extraction on Kepler 442b, a world that mathematical analysis indicated would be highly profitable. The planet contained enormous deposits of rare elements essential for advanced technology, and orbital surveys confirmed the accessibility of these resources. Every economic model suggested that mining operations would generate massive returns on investment. The project failed completely because the Guild's planners had ignored the cultural significance of Kepler 442b to the Altarian species. The crystalline beings considered the planet sacred due to unique energy formations that resonated with their natural biology. When mining operations began disrupting these formations, Altarian consumers launched galaxy-wide boycotts of Guild products that destroyed market demand for their extracted materials. Parker had always factored such cultural considerations into his economic analysis. He understood that Altarian purchasing power represented 15% of the galactic economy and that their religious beliefs influenced their commercial decisions. His reports had consistently warned against investments that might offend major species or disrupt traditional cultural practices. The Guild's bankruptcy triggered cascading failures throughout the galactic economy. Suppliers who had depended on Guild contracts found themselves unable to meet financial obligations. Currency markets destabilized as confidence in mining investments collapsed. Unemployment increased dramatically in systems that had specialized in resource extraction, creating social unrest that further disrupted economic activity. Research institutions across the galaxy began acknowledging what they reluctantly called the human factor gap. Projects that had thrived with human involvement now struggled with fundamental problems that their alien scientists could not solve, despite having vastly superior technology and analytical capabilities. The most prestigious research centers found themselves unable to make progress on problems that mixed human-alien teams had previously tackled successfully. Dr. Kevin Ross's former quantum field theory project had stalled completely despite the Silurian team's massive expansion of computational resources and personnel. Dr. Silvera now led a research group of 30 scientists equipped with the most advanced theoretical physics equipment in the galaxy. Their mathematical models could simulate quantum interactions with unprecedented precision, yet they remained unable to achieve the breakthrough discoveries that had seemed within reach during Ross's participation. The problem was not lack of intelligence or inadequate resources. The Silurian researchers were among the most brilliant minds in galactic civilization, and their experimental facilities exceeded anything available during the human collaboration. What they lacked was Ross's intuitive ability to recognize patterns in complex data and make creative leaps that connected seemingly unrelated concepts. Silvera found herself studying recordings of Ross's research presentations, trying to understand how the human had approached theoretical problems so differently from conventional scientific methodology. His insights had emerged from what he called educated guessing and following hunches, approaches that violated everything the everything. Silurians had been taught about proper research procedures. The recordings revealed that Ross had possessed an unusual talent for recognizing when mathematical equations were pointing toward deeper truths that formal analysis could not quite reach. He would study complex datasets and somehow sense which anomalies were significant and which were merely statistical noise. His theoretical frameworks had emerged from intuitive understanding rather than systematic derivation. Medical research. Teams throughout the galaxy experienced similar difficulties, developing treatments for multi-species diseases without human insights into biological adaptation. Human researchers had brought unique perspectives on how different species' immune systems interacted with foreign pathogens and how cultural practices influenced the spread of infectious diseases. Dr. Lisa Grant had been humanity's leading expert on multi-species medicine before the withdrawal. Her research had led to breakthrough treatments for 17 different diseases that affected multiple alien species. Grant had possessed an unusual ability to recognize how different biological systems would respond to various therapeutic approaches. Insights that had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Her former colleagues at the Galactic Medical Institute found themselves unable to develop effective treatments for a new plague that was spreading through the trade routes. The disease affected 6 different species in completely different ways, creating symptoms that seemed to have no logical connection. Traditional medical research methods failed to identify common factors that could be targeted by universal treatments. Grant had approached such problems by studying not just the biological mechanisms of disease, but also the cultural and environmental factors that influenced how different species responded to illness. She understood that Vraxian social structures encouraged behaviors that accelerated disease transmission, while Altarian meditation practices enhanced immune system responses. Her treatments had addressed these cultural factors as well as biological ones. Archaeological expeditions struggled to interpret alien ruins without human cultural anthropologists who had possessed intuitive understanding of how different civilizations expressed their beliefs. Through architecture and art, deep space exploration missions consistently failed to locate valuable worlds without human commanders who had somehow known where to look based on environmental clues that could not be quantified. 10 years after humanity's quiet departure, the Galactic Council faced a reality they could no longer deny. 3 major wars raged across the outer territories. Economic collapse threatened core worlds, and technological progress had stagnated to levels not seen in centuries. The carefully constructed civilization that had taken millennia to build was crumbling without the human contributions that no one had bothered to understand or value. Ambassador Zithkar stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his 4 eyes reflecting a desperation that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The same Vraxian who had casually dismissed humanity's withdrawal now found himself pleading with delegates to approve a mission he would have considered beneath his dignity 10 years ago. The irony was not lost on him, though pride prevented him from acknowledging it openly. The correlation between human departure and our current difficulties can no longer be classified as coincidental, Zethkar announced to the assembled delegates. Statistical analysis indicates a 97% probability that these events are directly connected. We must attempt to re-establish contact with humanity and negotiate their return to galactic society. The debate that followed revealed the depth of alien arrogance and the difficulty of admitting fundamental mistakes. The Altarian delegate, her crystalline form flickering with agitated energy patterns, insisted that superior alien intelligence would eventually solve their problems without human assistance. The Corvin representative argued that any approach to humanity would be seen as weakness and would encourage other species to make similar demands. Dr. Velthara, the Silurian scientist who had replaced Dr. Kevin Ross on the Quantum Research Project, provided the most compelling evidence for human importance. Her presentation included detailed analysis of research productivity across multiple fields, showing dramatic declines in breakthrough discoveries following human departure. The data was undeniable, though many delegates struggled to accept its implications. Human researchers contributed something beyond raw intelligence or technical capability, Velthara explained to the silent council chamber. They provided creative insights and intuitive problem-solving abilities that complemented our analytical approaches. Without their participation, our research teams have lost the ability to make the conceptual leaps that drive scientific progress. Economic data presented by Dr. Kixenol of the Andromedan Banking Consortium painted an equally disturbing picture. Market volatility had increased by 400% since human economists had departed. Currency fluctuations that Dr. James Parker had routinely predicted and prevented now caught galactic financial systems completely unprepared. The recent collapse of the Andromedan Mining Guild was only the latest in a series of economic disasters that had been entirely avoidable. General Vorthek, whose military campaigns in the Outer Rim had escalated rather than resolved the Zarian rebellion, reluctantly supported the diplomatic mission. His report to the council was a masterpiece of military doublespeak that avoided directly admitting failure, while acknowledging that his strategies had not achieved their intended objectives. The warrior's pride demanded careful phrasing that preserved his reputation while recognizing the need for alternative approaches. Current peacekeeping operations would benefit from additional tactical perspectives, Vorthak stated carefully. Human military advisors possessed certain operational insights that proved valuable in maintaining regional stability. Their participation in future peacekeeping efforts might contribute to more efficient conflict resolution. The vote to authorize contact with humanity passed by the narrowest possible margin. Many delegates supported the mission reluctantly, viewing it as a necessary evil rather than an acknowledgement of human importance. Others voted against it entirely, preferring to maintain the fiction that galactic civilization could solve its problems without assistance from a species they had always considered inferior. Zethkar found himself appointed to lead the diplomatic mission, a task he accepted with mixed feelings of anticipation and dread. The Vraxion had served in diplomatic roles for over 3 centuries and had negotiated with dozens of species, but he had never approached any civilization from such a position of weakness. The psychological adjustment was almost as difficult as the practical challenges of the mission itself. The fleet that departed for Sol System represented the finest diplomatic and scientific assets the galaxy could assemble. 12 ships carried representatives from every major species, along with enough gifts and trade goods to demonstrate galactic prosperity and technological advancement. The mission planners hoped that impressive displays of alien capabilities would convince humanity to overlook their previous dismissive treatment. Admiral Zixandra commanded the fleet's escort vessels, her crystalline navigation expertise ensuring efficient travel through hyperspace corridors. The same officer who had failed to match Captain Susan Torres's exploration success now found herself responsible for humanity's first contact with galactic civilization in over a decade. Her orders emphasized peaceful intentions and diplomatic protocol above all other considerations. Dr. Silvera accompanied the mission as chief scientific advisor, carrying detailed proposals for renewed research cooperation and offers of advanced technology sharing. The Silurian scientist had spent 3 years analyzing human research methodologies, hoping to understand the creative processes that her team had lost. Her luggage contained complete records of every stalled project that had previously benefited from human participation. The journey to Sol System took 3 standard weeks using the fastest hyperspace routes available. During the voyage, mission members reviewed everything known about human capabilities and cultural preferences, preparing for negotiations that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Most delegates expected to find humanity eager to rejoin the galaxy after a decade of isolation and technological stagnation. Their arrival at the edge of Sol System revealed the first shocking indication that their assumptions were completely wrong. Earth's defensive perimeter, which had consisted of a few orbital platforms and outdated missile systems when humans had departed galactic society, was now completely impenetrable. Advanced sensor sweeps detected energy signatures that matched no known technology in galactic databases. Admiral Carroll Price commanded humanity's home defense fleet from the bridge of the battleship Liberty. The 68-year-old officer had spent the previous decade overseeing humanity's military development in isolation. Her ships used propulsion systems that seemed to phase in and out of normal spacetime, appearing and disappearing at will around the alien fleet without triggering any defensive responses. Price's vessels demonstrated capabilities that should have been theoretically impossible. They moved without visible engines, communicated through instantaneous methods that bypassed known physics, and generated defensive fields that effortlessly deflected the aliens' most advanced scanning attempts. The human ships appeared to exist partially outside normal reality, utilizing technologies that galactic science had never imagined. Zethkar's attempts at communication were answered by a simple message from Director Paul Martin, Earth's new external affairs coordinator. The 45-year-old diplomat had been selected specifically for his ability to project calm authority while managing alien expectations. His response was courteous but firm, establishing humanity's position from the beginning. Humanity appreciates the Galactic Council's interest in renewed relations, Martin's message stated. However, we require time to consider whether such interaction serves our species' best interests. Please maintain a respectful distance while we deliberate. Any attempt to approach Earth or scan our defensive systems will be interpreted as hostile. Action. The alien fleet found itself trapped in an impossible situation. Their advanced sensors could not penetrate human defensive screens to gather intelligence about Earth's capabilities. Their communication attempts received only automated responses referring them to Director Martin's original message. Their ships were effectively surrounded by human vessels that could appear and disappear without warning, making any aggressive action suicidal. Dr. Silvera conducted detailed analysis of the energy readings she could detect from human ships, hoping to understand the technological principles behind their apparent advantages. Her instruments recorded power signatures that violated fundamental laws of physics as galactic science understood them. The human vessels seemed to draw energy from sources that should not exist and manipulate spacetime in ways that theoretical models claimed were impossible. When the aliens attempted to deploy sensor probes for closer examination of human technology, the devices were gently but firmly disabled by methods that left no trace of intervention. The probes simply stopped functioning when they approached human positions, their systems shutting down without damage or apparent external influence. Recovery teams found the devices intact, but completely inoperative, as if their operational principles had been somehow forgotten. Admiral Price allowed the alien fleet to remain at the edge of the Sol system for exactly 72 hours before delivering a more pointed message. Her communication included detailed scans of every alien vessel. 15 years after humanity's quiet departure from galactic civilization, the first formal diplomatic meeting between humans and aliens took place in neutral space. The location was precisely equidistant between Sol system and the nearest alien colony, a symbolic choice that emphasized humanity's insistence on complete equality in all future negotiations. The meeting would determine whether galactic civilization could be rebuilt or would continue its descent into chaos and conflict. Secretary of State Linda Clark led the human delegation with the same quiet confidence that had characterized humanity's original withdrawal from galactic society. The 57-year-old diplomat had spent the previous decade serving in Earth's new government, helping to shape humanity's response to their isolation and eventual technological advancement. Her calm demeanor masked the significance of decisions that would affect billions of lives across the galaxy. Clark was accompanied by Admiral Carol Price, whose defensive fleet had demonstrated humanity's military superiority during the aliens' desperate visit to Sol system. Dr. Rachel Wood, formerly a minor researcher in human-alien cooperative projects, now served as Earth's chief science advisor and had overseen breakthrough discoveries that solved several fundamental physics problems. Director Paul Martin, who had managed initial contact with the returning aliens, completed the human team. Across the conference table sat representatives of 7 major galactic civilizations, all of whom had previously considered humanity irrelevant to their affairs. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vraxian Empire led the alien delegation, the same being who had casually dismissed humanity's withdrawal 15 years earlier. The massive alien's 4 eyes reflected a mixture of desperation and humiliation that would have been unthinkable during their species' previous encounters. Dr. Silvera represented the Silurian scientific community, carrying proposals for renewed research cooperation and detailed acknowledgement of human contributions to previous breakthroughs. General Vorthak attended as military advisor, his presence a tacit admission that superior alien firepower had failed to maintain galactic peace without human diplomatic intervention. Economic representative Dr. Kixnell brought documentation of the financial disasters that had followed human economists' departure. The conference chamber was specially constructed for this meeting, with environmental controls that accommodated the biological requirements of all attending species. Human technology had provided the location's defensive systems and communications equipment, subtle demonstrations of capabilities that no alien civilization could match. The humans had insisted on providing security for the meeting, another indication of how completely the power dynamic had shifted. Clark's opening statement was delivered without malice or triumph, but her words carried the weight of vindication that had been 15 years in the making. The Galactic Council dismissed humanity as primitive and inconsequential when we announced our withdrawal from galactic society. You failed to recognize that our supposed weaknesses were actually strengths that held your civilization together. She paused to allow translation systems to process her words, noting the uncomfortable shifting among alien delegates as the implications became clear. Our emotional intelligence allowed us to understand and mediate between species that considered each other incomprehensible. Our intuitive problem-solving abilities filled gaps that pure logic could not bridge. Our cultural adaptability made us natural intermediaries in a galaxy full of rigid thinking patterns. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of life support systems as alien delegates absorbed the magnitude of their miscalculation. Clark continued with devastating calm, each word chosen for maximum impact while maintaining diplomatic courtesy. When we left, you didn't simply lose a minor member species. You lost the social adhesive that held your civilization together. You lost the creative spark that drove innovation. You lost the diplomatic bridges that prevented conflicts. Admiral Price spoke next, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had watched civilizations rise and fall. The galaxy discovered too late that humanity wasn't the weakest link in galactic society. We were the keystone that held everything else in place. Remove the keystone, and the entire structure collapses, which is exactly what happened. Zeth Kar attempted to respond with diplomatic language that preserved some semblance of alien dignity. The Galactic Council acknowledges that humanity's contributions were perhaps more significant than initially recognized. We hope that past misunderstandings can be resolved through renewed cooperation that benefits all species involved. Clark's response was gentle but implacable. Ambassador Zeth Kar, there are no misunderstandings to resolve. Your species and others made conscious decisions to dismiss human capabilities based on prejudice and arrogance. The consequences of those decisions have brought galactic civilization to the brink of collapse. We are not here to restore the previous relationship, but to establish an entirely new one. Dr. Wood presented humanity's scientific achievements during their period of isolation, projecting holographic displays that showed technological advances the aliens could barely comprehend. Faster-than-light communication that operated instantaneously across galactic distances. Matter replication systems that could create any desired substance from basic elements. Energy generation methods that tapped into fundamental forces the aliens had never imagined. During our isolation, we solved the unified field equations that your species considered theoretically impossible. Wood explained to the stunned alien scientists. We developed space-time manipulation techniques that allow our ships to exist partially outside normal reality. We created artificial intelligence systems that enhance human intuition rather than replacing it. We achieved these breakthroughs by embracing the creative thinking processes that you dismissed as unscientific. The technological demonstrations were designed to establish humanity's position as the dominant civilization in known space. Human ships had escorted the alien delegates to the meeting site, their vessels moving through space in ways that violated every known principle of physics. The aliens found themselves completely dependent on human technology for the communications and life support systems that made the meeting possible. Director Martin addressed the economic aspects of galactic reconstruction, presenting proposals that would reshape interstellar commerce around human principles rather than alien ones. Previous economic models failed because they ignored the psychological and cultural factors that drive market behavior. Human economists understood these factors intuitively, which is why we consistently predicted and prevented the financial disasters that have plagued the galaxy since our departure. The aliens' response revealed the depth of their desperation and the completeness of their defeat. Dr. Silvera formally requested human assistance in completing the quantum field research that had stalled after Dr. Kevin Ross's departure. General Vorthak acknowledged that military force alone could not resolve the conflicts that continued spreading throughout the galaxy. Economic advisor Dr. Kixnell admitted that alien financial models had proven inadequate for managing galactic commerce. Clark listened to each request with patient attention before delivering humanity's conditions for renewed cooperation. The galaxy will be rebuilt according to human principles of cooperation, creativity, and mutual respect. Species that previously considered themselves superior will accept human leadership in areas where our capabilities exceed yours. Military conflicts will be resolved through negotiation and cultural understanding rather than force alone. The terms were revolutionary by galactic standards, but represented the only path toward stability and prosperity. Human advisors would be assigned to major research projects, with alien scientists working under human direction rather than alongside human colleagues. Diplomatic disputes would be mediated by human negotiators who possessed the emotional intelligence to understand cultural motivations. Economic policies would be developed by human economists who could predict market behavior based on psychological factors. Admiral Price outlined humanity's military expectations with calm precision. Human peacekeeping forces will be deployed to conflict zones throughout the galaxy. Our commanders will have authority to override local military decisions when necessary to prevent escalation. Alien forces will serve in support roles under human strategic direction. This arrangement will continue until galactic stability is restored. The alien delegates found themselves accepting terms that would have been unthinkable 15 years earlier. Species that had ruled star empires for millennia agreed to subordinate their military forces to human command. Civilizations that had considered themselves intellectually superior acknowledged human leadership in scientific research. Economic powerhouses accepted human oversight of their financial policies. Dr. Wood presented the most significant revelation of the entire meeting. Humanity's advancement during our isolation was not achieved through technological development alone. We discovered methods of enhancing human intuition and creativity that allow us to solve problems beyond the reach of pure logic. Our capabilities will continue expanding as we develop these abilities further.